Born from primordial stardust 4.5 billion years ago, Jupiter was the solar system's first planet. And much like its namesake, the king of the ancient Roman gods, Jupiter was destined for greatness. Jupiter is the fifth planet from the Sun and the largest planet in the solar system. At approximately 11 Earths wide, Jupiter has twice the amount of mass as the other planets put together. But unlike Earth and the three other terrestrial worlds, Jupiter has no solid surface. It may not even have a traditionally solid core. Rather, this giant planet may have a dense liquid center surrounded by a worldwide ocean of hydrogen and helium gases. Jupiter's gaseous composition can be observed in its atmosphere. About 44 miles thick, the atmosphere is a canvas of stripes and storms churning across the giant planet. Their colors range between shades of whites, yellows, browns, and reds, all caused by the different chemical makeup of each area. Probably the most iconic feature of Jupiter is a crimson-brown storm that's been raging for over 300 years, the Great Red Spot. It's a giant swirling collection of clouds with wind speeds of up to 400 miles per hour, at least 2.5 times faster than Category 5 hurricanes. Floating hundreds of miles above the storms of Jupiter are about 79 moons, the most of the 8 known planets. The 4 largest moons were discovered by Galileo in 1610. Called the Galilean satellites, they include Io, the most volcanically active celestial body in the solar system, Ganymede, the solar system's largest moon, even larger than the planet Mercury, and Callisto and Europa, which, along with Ganymede, may contain oceans of liquid water underneath their crusts. Jupiter's large collection of moons is only made possible by the planet's massive size and gravitational pull, the strongest of all the planets in the solar system. This incredible gravity also influenced the sizes of the 7 other planets. During the solar system's earliest days, Jupiter, being the first planet to form, attracted and destroyed space debris that would have helped the other planets grow in size. Today, that force may serve as a shield by attracting comets and asteroids onto Jupiter's own surface, preventing them from crashing onto inner planets like Earth. Apart from the Sun, Jupiter has become the dominant figure in the solar system, thereby earning its place at the top of the planetary heap as king. With its gold color and stunning rings, Saturn is quite a planetary gem. Saturn is the second largest of the 8 planets, and it is about 10 times as wide as Earth. Despite its size, Saturn is actually the lightest planet.
One hour and 51. What?
Jupiter in astrology. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you are feeling really well. I wanted to come on here early in 2021 and make a really fun, comprehensive astrology video for you. I know that things are a little bit crazy in the world, and I thought what a great time to introduce some new concepts and traditional concepts about the planet of Jupiter in astrology, what it means in your birth chart, and what it means in each sign. So if you haven't seen this series yet, I have been making a series of videos for about the last 2 years about every planet and body in astrology through the signs and talking about it. I have a whole playlist called Through the Signs, and all of this series is in that playlist, so I'll link that below. And also, if you are new, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you enjoy this video, if it resonates, and do share it with someone else who you would like to see their Jupiter sign. And the way to figure out what sign your Jupiter is placed in is to calculate your birth chart. There are many free online resources where you can find that out, and it's quite simple. But yes, without further ado, I will go ahead and also drop the Patreon page for this YouTube channel. Without the support of the patrons, none of these videos would be possible. And if you would like to get bonus content and support this channel and see some other really cool, exciting pieces, be sure to check that out as well. I will link it below. Anyway, everyone, what a wonderful time to be talking about Jupiter. So as I am filming this, Jupiter has just come out of its debilitated sign of Capricorn, which it was in from the end of 2019 until the end of 2020. So basically the entire calendar year of 2020, we had a debilitated Jupiter. That's really interesting to think about, isn't it? Given the course of the year and how many of us experienced the year of 2020. Now, though, as we are in later January, mid-January, or whenever you're watching this, it could be anywhere depending on what time of the year or what year you're watching this in. But right now, Jupiter's in Aquarius, and I thought this was a really good time. In fact, today, Mercury and Jupiter are conjunct at 5 degrees of Aquarius, so I thought it was the perfect day to really communicate and think about Jupiter. So yes, let's talk about Jupiter as a planet, and then we'll get into the sign by sign portion of the video. So Jupiter as a planet is not very debated. It's not a very contentious subject. Traditionally, the collective opinions and ideas of this planet are quite similar. So it's like the planet of good luck, the planet of benevolence, the planet of philosophy, higher learning, academics, creativity, motivation, politics as well, jovial behavior patterns, humor, things that are very positive feeling, typically, not always. Jupiter is like the expansion theme, okay? And also it is, so I'm talking a little bit about the traditional, and we'll go into some of the more minute aspects of it here in a second, but typically how we look at Jupiter astrologically is an intensifier, an expander. So whatever planet or sign or house in natal or transiting that it is in the vicinity of will have a type of expansion or a type of focus put onto it, a magnifying glass put over it in a way, making it bigger, making it more focused. So this makes Jupiter actually quite variable, because depending on where it's transiting or depending on what it's doing, it can like really intensify good or bad situations. It can be pretty chaotic, actually, as we saw with 2020, when we had Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto conjunct in Capricorn, debilitated Jupiter conjunct the very hierarchical, power-mongering energy of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. It really intensified that feeling of, control and limitations and structure to maybe a level that many humans have not seen in a very long time. And that is the nature of Jupiter, but it can do equally as much to expand positive aspects as well. Jupiter also tends to be seen as a mitigating influence as well. So perhaps having Jupiter in Capricorn, this is very debatable, and I could see either way. Maybe having Jupiter with Saturn and Pluto might have actually mitigated some of the intensity that that transit could have otherwise brought as well. Though there's also an argument that it further, debilitated or further intensified the difficulty. Though I actually think it could have been a little bit of a mitigating essence. Actually, if I look back historically to how Saturn-Pluto conjunctions have been in history, they have actually tended to be a little bit more violent. So yes, perhaps it was mitigating in a way, but then also in another way, more heavy, yet mitigating, heavily mitigating, something like that. But yes, it expands, it intensifies, it mitigates, and it also brings a feeling of, what do I want to say? Something sticking out. So Jupiter kind of sticks out. It does not blend in, it does not camouflage, it does not chameleon itself. It is very personalized, very individual energy. It is very much like bright. It's like the energy of the color orange, all right? Jupiter obviously rules the sign of Sagittarius, which is the strangest creature represented in the astrology system. It's the only mythological creature. It's the centaur. Okay, all of the other animals represented in the zodiac are normal, everyday things that are like earth dwellers, and maybe centaurs are. We certainly don't know of them if they exist now. They are mythological. So there's a mythological nature to Jupiter as well, something almost out of a story, something legendary, something very unhuman also about Jupiter. Jupiter was previously the ruler of Pisces.
Hello.
Okay, it was the traditional ruler of Pisces before Neptune was discovered. So Pisces being the ethereal, otherworldly, sort of alien, super spiritual energy. So Jupiter has an essence of that as well, an essence of otherworldly, sort of also religious and dogmatic energy too that Pisces brings with it as well. So there is, on the negative side of Jupiter, a sort of philosophical dogma that can come up. Jupiter is also the political planet, so party ideologies, anything that is like a group of people coming together under one thought and sort of becoming enmeshed. Again, this is very Piscean, and now more so a Neptunian principle. But Jupiter really is the philosophy itself, and then Pisces and Neptune sort of being the unitary pulling together of a collective. But they kind of go hand in hand, don't they? You can't really have a group or a similar theme without a binding type of philosophy, religion, or dogma. So these things are very, also law comes up with Jupiter too, in the sense of how people are, yes, pulled together or given a more sense of uniformity through common concepts or laws. Without our concepts, without our philosophies, no laws or politics are created either, so they're all based on non-tangible concepts. Also based in tradition, history, and mythologies as well. So that is also a consideration. Nothing about Jupiter is too physical, okay? It's not a very physical, it's a gas giant, planetarily. It's, we don't really know much about what's actually beneath all of that with Jupiter. So it's like the biggest planet in our solar system, of course. Almost big enough to be a star. There have been many times that we've been worried that Jupiter might turn into a star, as it is, exponentially bigger than other planets in our solar system. And it's in a weird place. This is kind of the energy of Jupiter because it's right in the middle of the solar system, and its placement is strange for its size, and it stands out. Okay, it really stands out, and it has the huge storm as well on the planet, which we don't see in the same way on other planets. So there's something that's like very individual about Jupiter, and it's also very protective. It protects, its gravitational field has protected Earth from, asteroids in the asteroid belt and the other planets as well. So it is big enough to not be damaged by those things in the same way, and its gravitational pull is huge. So that's the other thing about Jupiterian energy, is it has a pull. So whenever you're like honing your Jupiter or thinking of like Jupiter in your chart, this is also going to be the area where you really have a pull, or where you really have a sense of power or a sense of, gravity about you also. With that then comes ability to also have like errors or mess up or have a bit of a slip up, and, with that sense of gravity. Usually there is always a sense of luck with well-placed Jupiter. So again, Jupiter rules the signs of Sagittarius, and it is a traditional ruler of Pisces, and it is exalted in Cancer, okay? And then it is debilitated in Gemini and Capricorn, okay? And does not do too well in Virgo either. Thinking of all the opposition axes with the home placements versus the debilitations. Talking a little bit more about Jupiter in the chart, so for the individual, depending on what house it's in is going to make a huge difference, as with all of the placements. Jupiter in the 9th house, Jupiter in the 4th house, Jupiter in the 12th house, all of these are very positive. Jupiter, however, in like the 3rd house, Jupiter in the, let's see, thinking of math here, Jupiter in the 6th house, Jupiter in the, Jupiter in the 10th house. These like struggle a little bit more, though Jupiter in the 10th house can also be quite good. Jupiter has, the placement of Jupiter also has a lot of effect on the physical appearance. It is one of the physical appearance modifiers. Jupiter and Saturn both are, as well as Venus. All of the planets can be depending on how they're placed, but Jupiter is going to also show like the shape of your body as well. So a very positively placed Jupiter will tend to create more of a rounded figure, so more of a rounded face, a potential to be a larger person, taller, bigger boned, and just a tendency to carry weight as well. Again, Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system, so people with like a very positively placed Jupiter are going to be bigger people. Whereas if you've got maybe a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction or Jupiter-Saturn square, Saturn hitting Jupiter or Mars hitting Jupiter, the people tend to be more thin and lithe and more, muscular and not as soft, okay? And then also the placement of the signs. So a Jupiter in Capricorn is going to be more of a thin, smaller person, whereas like Jupiter in Cancer may be, really just a much larger frame, okay? So it does have an effect. And basically also how you're read in a crowd. Jupiter really plays a big role in that too. Do you stand out in a crowd? Do you blend in? Are you like a wallflower? Are you the center of attention? What colors are you drawn to? How do you dress when you're in a lot of, around a lot of people? Do you dress in colors like those oranges or those purples, those Sagittarian colors that really make you stand out? Or is it more of a grayness? That is usually always depicted in the Jupiter, because we see preferences, we see philosophies on style, philosophies on clothing, philosophies on styles and trends and shapes and materials and versus other people. So that is a big part of what Jupiter represents. Another thing that Jupiter has a really big impact on is self-conveyance. So this kind of goes along the line, okay, so this is something we don't really think about in this modern time, but this used to be much more of a focus, is like the way a body is animated, or the way that one carries oneself, or the way that one is animated, I would say, is the best way to put it. It's like your spirit, it's your soul essence, it's your, and this can sometimes again be a result of philosophy or a result of collectives where we walk a certain way, or we look up or we look down, we look people in the eye or we don't look people in the eye. These types of customs, these types of norms, these types of sociological and religious and courtly type of theories and ideas are all also ruled by Jupiter. So yes, your Jupiter placement is going to have a large impact on how much you adhere to these things, whether you do or you don't, how much consideration or thought goes into these things. And within that, you also see, yes, as Jupiter is the natural ruler of the 9th house, how you're then received by other people based on your adherence to certain customs, norms, philosophies, and societal, I guess I would say like implements or customs, norms, yeah. So that's probably one of the most important things that I can tell you about Jupiter that's not so typically talked about, is it really is like personal animation, it is the self-essence, and then also the way that that is received and seen by others. This is not so personal, okay? It's not like, and I mean, maybe for, depending on some Jupiter placements, maybe if you have like Jupiter in Cancer or in the 4th house, this is much more of a self, because again, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so it does have something to do with the self, yes. But again, it's like the face that we put on when we go out of the house, when we're walking in public, when we're engaging with public, okay? And people with a very well-placed Jupiter, there's not going to be a huge difference between the way that they are in their home and then how they are with the public. And that's why people with well-placed Jupiters tend to have very positive reputations and tend to be received very well, is because there's an authenticity and a natural demeanor that is not forced, but also it resonates well with people outside of themselves. So typically people with well-placed Jupiters will just naturally, authentically display societal values, okay? Therefore, they are well accepted or well versed in society typically, because having a well-placed Jupiter means like good societal karma. Usually, not, it doesn't necessarily mean like riches or wealth or prosperity or, you know, like a type of like upper class life, though that is typically also indicated with well-placed Jupiters. Like usually money is not a problem, and everything in life materially comes together to facilitate a type of ease and simplicity. And there is no such thing really as ease or simplicity if one is out of favor with societal norms. That is just is. So, though that is changing, I would say that that is something that is collectively changing, where people can potentially have just a more individual time and craft and create an individual type of experience where they're not so reliant, you know, with like the new internet age, with wealth being able to be made like remotely and through the internet. Yes, it is more possible for people not to rely on society, though that would also be a societal evolution, wouldn't it? That would be an aspect of society, that individuality is possible. So to be in that with a well-placed Jupiter would mean that the society has created that to a degree as well, and that is also a construct of society. So yeah, people with Jupiter don't have to worry about these things so much, about like, what is society? Who am I? It's just all natural. Contrarily, people with a Jupiter debilitated or that struggles in a configuration of malefics or in a difficult house, and we'll talk about what constitutes that soon. If your Jupiter struggles a little bit more, it is indicated that karmically this life is a lot about processing your own self in comparison to the outside world. Again, this part of the zodiac wheel, 9th, 10th, 11th house, deals with the individual in the collective as it relates to the collective. This isn't just some kind of like trendy, oh yeah, let's all think about society. That's just what this part of astrology deals with. If you want to see more about like just completely personal individual stuff, look at my moon video, okay, look at my Venus video, look at even the Saturn video to a degree. Those are all much more, Saturn is not really that either because it's also the 10th house. But certainly the moon and Venus and even the Mercury video, many of the other placements are just about selfhood and just doesn't, without even really considering, you know, society. But this one, Jupiter, is about people in the world, okay? People with dynamics coming together and working in tandem. And yes, if you have that more struggling Jupiter placement, there's a lot to process about how I find my way or how I fit in or how I do or don't fit in or how the path that I choose to create in tandem or not with society. There's a lot of quarrelsome processes around that, and perhaps too much focus as well. I will say Jupiter as a planet is not really a huge focusing element, so we don't really think like my Jupiter and that's what I'm going to do. It just kind of like exists. It like really creates a vibration, and it really creates a sort of natural momentum for itself typically. And another thing to work on a lot with a debilitated Jupiter is timing, okay? It is, you know, what's happening at what time? What is the routine aspect of what I'm going through? What is the, you know, at what time or in what format or in what situation do I find that good things are happening and vice versa, bad things are happening? There's a lot of conscious, because when Jupiter's debilitated, we have to look to Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn work in this weird type of reception with one another, where if we have a very debilitated Saturn, okay, we've got to look to Jupiter. If we've got a very debilitated Jupiter, we've got to look to Saturn and in the chart of the individual, and then we can understand a little bit more about the way to move forward. So just say, as an example, say you've got natal Jupiter in Capricorn, and that natal Jupiter in Capricorn is like, let's just say you were born in 2020 and you've got this Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunct in Capricorn. That's going to be interesting. So in this example, it might not really be the best example, actually. As Jupiter is debilitated, we look to Saturn. Saturn is well placed at home in Capricorn. So where this person can make up for the difficulty of sort of like indecisiveness of not knowing how to place themselves, as the people in that year will probably really struggle with, who are born in 2020, not really knowing how to place themselves ideologically, societally, or, geographically even. What we would look for would be that incredibly placed Saturn in Capricorn and seeing, okay, what's actually going to be a very huge source of ease for this person is in building. So the people with this generational placement are going to be incredible builders, they're going to be incredible architects, they're going to be incredible, also governors, I would say. Things like that. They're going to be incredible, but very strict and very discerning and very regulatory and ethically concerned things come up. So with that debilitated Jupiter, there's going to be a difficulty in comprehending the value of something, difficulty in comprehending the cost or the true cost of a certain set of issues. So we look to Saturn, and what we see is maybe a totally like a traditional scope on the building of like economy or the building of monetary experiences, very traditional Saturn in Capricorn, and also maybe some type of new regulatory patterns that create more power through the Pluto conjunction as well. And that would be how we would hopefully see the offsetting of that debilitated Jupiter would be through some kind of reintroduction of something traditional to offset the confusion created. So that's kind of a long tangent, just an example, and a little bit of another tangent into the 2020 triple conjunction. But another example, just to kind of offset this a little bit more, say you've got a debilitated Jupiter in Gemini, okay? And with that debilitated Jupiter in Gemini, you've also, let's say, got Saturn in Libra. Say you've got that exalted Saturn in Libra with Jupiter in Gemini. So with Jupiter in Gemini, we'll talk all about that in the sign by sign, but basically you would look to that Saturn in Libra, you'd get a lot more strategic with things. You'd start really, slowing things down and getting real about how the decisions that you've made have impacted you and understand the power of your decision-making process instead of being short-term with things. We would really look to that Saturn basically to help heal up the struggles of that Jupiter. The last thing that I'm going to talk about before we get into the sign by sign is just how to use your Jupiter, how to wield that incredible lucky benevolence regardless of what sign it's in. So the only way to work through Jupiter is to actually not overthink things and not get too realistic. This is interesting, and take this with a grain of salt because this depends on the situation and this depends on also the other transits. This is not an always mentality or philosophy, but the second that you get really rigid with, chain of events, with outcomes, with formulas, with this plus this equals that, with routines, you are exiting Jupiter to a degree. And of course, philosophies and formulas, those have a degree of Jupiter to them, but there's a part of Jupiter that just deals with walking through, just risking. It's kind of a gambling energy. It's like just getting in there, just walking it off, so I'll give you another kind of analogy. So you're running a long marathon. Let's say you're running a marathon or you're running a distance. You trip and fall. So the Saturn mentality would be to call the medic and have an examination done of your ankle that's hurting before you get up. The Jupiter mentality would be walk it off and just get back into it, assuming that there's some amount of ambiguity into your condition. So having an ambiguous condition or having a time in life where you have like this crossroads is where we usually choose between a Jupiter and Saturn method. Are we going to kind of risk and gamble into this and sort of ride the plumes, or are we going to be very methodical, really try to be guided or seek out some type of mentorship or guiding hand to completely structure the way forward? Jupiter is about risk and it's about gamble and it's about taking advantage of natural talents. And sometimes it isn't scrupulous, sometimes it makes errors, and sometimes there's a, there's a recklessness and a, just bombarding type of boisterous and histrionic flair with Jupiter also, you know. So I would say that there's a time and a place to really access Jupiter, but I will also say that, things that Jupiter rules over, quick gains and, really rising high quickly, fire gaining ground through the air around it. You'll never really be in Jupiter territory if you do the safe, assured, and status quo traditional thing. Okay, you're in Saturn territory when you're there, and that is also necessary most of the time, actually. But if you're kind of thinking, okay, I want to really hone in on my Jupiter, I want to have more luck in my life, that never comes in a constructed, planned way. You can't really strategize around luck. You can't really strategize around unexpected gains. You can only strategize around traditional, tried and true methods of gaining a type of middle of the way or even smaller gain over time. That's the only way that you can get that type of gain. So, if there's no sense of risk, if there's no sense of gamble, if there's no sense of, throwing the dice, you're not really using your Jupiter at all. Likewise, if that's all that you're doing, it's going to be a problem too. If there's no real method, if there's no real, manual and process of, you're not using Saturn. It's about balancing the inner Jupiter and Saturn, which are quite good analogies just for different psychological and chemical drives within the human condition and experience, as that's a lot of times what we use astrology for. These planets over many millennia of astrological study have been tied through observance to certain human traits, as we are stardust as well as a human body, and all life has come from the explosion of stars. So I should make a whole video on that, but that's quite a nice brief little summary of the validity of astrology. How could the transiting bodies not have an effect? And of course, as we are stardust, they're going to have an effect. And certainly the translation of that effect is not always going to be correct, as we are still human. But that tends to be the case with most sciences, with most forms of math, discovery, science, philosophy. It's only really as correct as people believe it to be, and as correct as many, many years of observance and patterns create. So this is all very Jupiterian talk as well. Let's move on though. Let's get into the sign to sign and talk about Jupiter through the signs. Okay, Jupiter in Aries, starting off with a very fiery, very exciting, very visceral and cinematic energy. Let's see, so very aggressive. This is Jupiter in Mars's sign. So this is a very masculine, forward moving, pioneering energy. It's kind of also very adventurous. Okay, so this is the first debilitation of Jupiter. We have Jupiter placed into Mercury's sign. Why is that debilitated? So Jupiter is debilitated in Mercury's sign, and Mercury is debilitated in Jupiter's sign. These two planets do not like each other. Mercury is the second smallest planet in the solar system, second to Pluto, and it moves so quickly around the sun that it just does not resonate well. Jupiter's the biggest planet, so it's putting all that big, vast energy into Mercury, which just cannot comprehend it, and vice versa. It's putting the very tiny energy of Mercury into Jupiter, which just gets kind of lost. So as you guys know, debilitations are not always bad. Debilitations can be helpful. They can be prudent and shaping of lessons that make you very formidable. And then also, really positive placements can sometimes be problematic during times of difficulty or when things aren't easy. But Jupiter in Gemini, it's too quick and shifty. It's a bit unfocused. It's quite contrarian, and it struggles, I would say, to see the forest for the trees. There's something quite myopic about this placement. Though it is very well coordinated, tech savvy, and enterprising, but it tends to think small with it. So it gets like really ADD with things, so the focus really shifts into a lot of different places. They are kind of like very eccentric in their knowledge though with that, so they can really have a lot of like diverse knowledge and know a little bit about a lot of things.
Doesn't fit very
Kind of
well.
like the opposition Jupiter and Sagittarius. There's an eccentric knowledge with Jupiter in Gemini. There's a like a large, just lots of experience that brings many new ideas. The difference is though that Jupiter in Gemini does not really use this ability in the same way as Jupiter and Sag. So Jupiter and Sag channels this up into the broader societal stuff, whereas Jupiter and Gemini keeps this quite mundane. So there's a lot of like shifting around in the daily life, and a lot of like different mindsets applied to very mundane things that are inconsequential. So all of this like lofty, eccentric mind mapping is kind of leaked out into things that aren't really, again, consequential. Though they can really focus this in a new way. They can really focus and work on this placement to become more like Jupiter and Sag, where it's, focused up, especially if this is like well placed or has a Venus near it, or is placed in a positive house for Jupiter. This looks more like Jupiter and Sag in that case. Specifically about Jupiter and Gemini, though, is it's very funny. So there's a very great sense of humor. There is a camaraderie and a sense of common ground with everybody. They're very good at relating. They're very good at also having charisma and having quite a good reputation as well, depending on other placements. But they tend to have like, people don't ever consider that Jupiter and Gemini is like antagonistic or like a big problem, because they tend to be so like wrapped up in mundane, trivial things that they never really find themselves in truly problematic, dangerous, or worrisome scenarios. And even if they are there, it's not really seen or observed. So there's a kind of, with every debilitation in astrology, there's also, a leg up. And for this one, it's like they can really shift in and out of any, situation. Like they really don't get stuck easily. It can be difficult for them to communicate how they really feel, because Jupiter is about context and bringing context into a larger stream of like consciousness, I guess, and making it connective. So putting Jupiter into Gemini and also Virgo gives quite a profound difficulty on the communication of dynamics or the communication of difficulties. It doesn't connect sometimes. So what they're feeling in their gut, it's really hard to connect that up into the mind and out of the mouth. So they can get very frustrated in that way, where they don't feel like they're being understood, or they don't feel like as they've felt something, they then communicate it, and then the perception of who they communicate it to this is probably the most important thing for Jupiter and Gemini to grow through, is learning how to really communicate their feelings, because that is a challenge for them. But once they do really focus on that and really try to decomplicate or uncomplicate the array of focuses in their lives to creating that sort of mutable, frenetic, complex, and unfocused energy, once they really develop their own identity and slow things down, then it feels that they can really communicate well. What else do I want to talk about Gemini Jupiter? It is still a very lucky placement nonetheless, even though it's debilitated and has weird situations relating to luck. I see that typically this placement somehow at the end of the day has had good luck, or somehow at the end of the day comes through with like little to no repercussions for problems. Now you can hear that and watch out for using that, because it doesn't mean that you just need to like go crazy and do like bad things or something, knowing that there might be little consequences, because that might really create some weird consequences. But I'm just saying my observance of this placement is that the complex webs and knots that they get tied up in philosophically and communicatively, while they affect them in the long term, at the same time, there's a complete detachment from consequence to some degree. And that's not going to be every single Jupiter in Gemini, but and it will depend obviously on the Saturn placement. But I feel like maybe it's more so about the how the Jupiter in Gemini then thinks about situations that have transpired, and can they really remember things well? Can they really remember things accurately and factually? This should be a very good gift for them, being able to remember things factually and well, but will they really implement that? That will decide how well or not this placement plays out for them. Okay, moving on, Jupiter in Cancer. So this is the first exalted placement of Jupiter. Jupiter in Cancer, of course, is a very, very lucky, very benevolent, exalted lunar placement for Jupiter. So it combines the energy of the moon and Jupiter, which is kind of like the energy of pregnancy, the energy of gestalt. It's also the you know how, hopefully, when most women are pregnant, they are quite well taken care of. They have like all the food that they need. They have other people to do things for them. Their families tend to like come together and really support or help out, and basically the pregnant woman can hopefully have a restful pregnancy. Of course, that's not everybody, but that's sort of archetypally what pregnancy is meant to be. Basically, these people have that their entire lives to some degree with Jupiter in Cancer. It is like the energy of having a lot of help, a lot of other moving parts that come together to create easiness, to create sort of an archetype of servitude around you. Also, you got to watch out for that. That can kind of come back, especially if Saturn is like in the 8th house or the 12th house, or placed in a Saturn. You would hope that Saturn would be in a strong placement with this, because this can get like weird too. I know that Jupiter in Cancer is exalted. I've seen it really create some chaos in people's life nonetheless, especially if the Saturn is not well placed. So if you have like Saturn in Capricorn or Saturn in Libra, or even Saturn in Taurus with Jupiter in Cancer, that's really powerful and really earthly, worldly, and great. Though a more dark and watery Saturn alongside of this, like a Saturn in Scorpio or a Saturn in Cancer especially, or even a Saturn, in Pisces for sure, could make very difficult contractual obligations in life. So very unspoken rules, unspoken formalities, not really knowing who you owe for what, like people doing kindness for you and expecting something in return, indebting yourself to people without realizing it. That can happen to this placement. Though it also has good luck. And again, as long as Saturn is not like in a crazy place with this, it makes healing quite easily. It makes things just naturally come together. It's also a sign of a good mother as well. So whether this person is a good mother or a good parent, it denotes the person themselves having typically had a very positive mother role in their own lives. So benefiting or learning a really good lesson from the mother. This gives, depending on the moon placement and Saturn placement, of course, a very good maternal role. So even if the relationship with the mother is not good, there tend to be like other figures throughout the life that come through and serve that role in an unspoken way. So inherited families can be really good. Friend groups that are like families. There's a very flexible philosophical idea of family with Jupiter in Cancer, which I think is probably the most important thing. Like you might have like a family of thousands of people throughout your life, because it's very easy to come into contact with Soul Tribe. That's another big positivity. Yeah, this placement has a lot of craziness and chaos to it, like the deeper parts of the ocean that Cancer represents. It has a lot of chaos, it has a lot of storms, it has a lot of problems, but at the same time, it really acclimates you to philosophically heal and also to encounter soul family. Like there's not a big separation from like-minded people with this placement. Also, ideas are naturally fertile, so it's very easy to get good business ideas, very easy to be in the right, philosophy. So being born into a group of people and having the, again, societal quota that is beneficial within that group of people, being naturally prestiged, being naturally well in society is usually also seen with this placement, because the Cancer energy is very traditional and it's very maternal and it's very receptive. So there's just a natural ease with this and a natural nobility and a natural tendency to have many people help for nothing. So there's a lot of help available. If you're a Jupiter in Cancer and you feel like you're having to do everything on your own, you feel like there's no one around to like, help you do anything, I would say that you're not really using this energy at all. Do see what you can do about having family help you, or having friends help you, or having more ease in your life. It should be very easy to figure out. Okay, moving on to Jupiter in Leo. Let's talk about Jupiter in Leo. That's pretty wild. So Jupiter in Leo, very positive. Jupiter loves all the fire signs. This one can be pretty crazy with the ego, but at the same time, it's very good at navigating hierarchy. It's very good at creating and innovating something that is needed by many people. And it also has very good ideas about how to, create a series of events that accomplish a goal. So not necessarily creating the goal. Like Jupiter and Leo can struggle creating the goal, but once the goal is set, they're very good at filling in those gaps, and very good and lucky and benevolent at achieving a set goal. This makes them really perfect project managers, especially if it's on the Leo Virgo cusp, because that's getting towards like Jupiter being conjunct Regulus, which could mean that a life in politics, or a life in high corporate systems, or something very, again, like human and egoic, would be indicated. Just leadership in general, leader capacity, leaderhood, leaderhood, whatever we want to call it, would be indicated with Jupiter, especially late in Leo, but anywhere in Leo, because this is the sign of, rulership, and the sign of, kings and such things. So putting Jupiter there gives a lot of luck when it comes to being in that vicinity of energy. What else is good for Jupiter in Leo? It's very playful, okay? Very strong with animal magnetism, very attractive, very easy time of dating, typically with Jupiter in Leo. I don't know if anybody has an easy time of dating, but if you could, it would be with this placement. It's really good for making new friends, so you want to watch out for getting a stale friend group. You want to watch out for really rigidifying or fixating the people in your life. This needs like turnover. This needs to meet new people. This needs some type of like movement. All the fixed signs, especially with Jupiter moves really fast, even though it's really big. So fixed energy is not great for it. As it is not at home in any of the fixed signs, it is at home in the mutable signs, and exalted in one of the cardinal signs. So fixed energy, this is the more difficult fire sign to have it in compared to Aries or Sag, because of the fixed signs' tendency to want to still things down and slow them down and control them. Jupiter is not about being controlled or slowed down. So the key for Jupiter and Leo is you got to watch out for controlling things and slowing down. You got to be quick with that Leo energy. You got to have those quick moves, those quick progressions, those quick judgment calls, and that quick. And as a leader, I feel that this placement struggles there a little bit. Even though it's prone to leadership, it's prone to, being at the front of things. That's the problem with it, is it, again, none of the fixed signs are really at the front. They're more of like the people filling in the gaps, and the people, really knowing how to get a certain place, and then kind of advising that process. That might really be best for this placement as a type of advisory role, or something that has them really filling in the gaps, though they want leadership. Again, the ego does not really care for those types of advisory roles. So here's the conflict with this placement, is that it can't decide what it wants, really, because Jupiter and the fixed energy of Leo, while compatible, also clash a little bit. And again, it's so close to Regulus. So Regulus, the fixed star, especially if you have a late degree Jupiter in Leo, it really is just sending so much energy into this placement, to where these people are like, maybe have like the energy of like 10 people inside of them, like the soul force or life force energy of like 10 people. I'm not saying that you have 10 people inside of you. I'm saying that your energy sources and your levels of energy are that of like multiple people. So yeah, it's very easy to burn out. It's very easy to have an autoimmune disease. It's very easy to overdo and overwork with that energy, and to lose control of circadian rhythms. getting out of the natural rhythm of things, trying to construct things, trying to make things too perfect or too like, this is how a leader looks, this is how somebody who gets into politics does, like, this is what they wear, this is how they come up, and I'm going to emulate that now. There's something about an emulation with this placement too, and struggling to find an individual voice where they will tend to like emulate what seems powerful, like through the TV. Like they've seen, okay, on TV, on Game of Thrones, this is what somebody looked like when they came into power. So that's, as I, start this like small endeavor, I'm going to, sort of like, I don't know, be a Cersei Lannister in that moment. So watch out for that. That's Hollywood. Okay. There's this struggle with this placement for discerning what is like Hollywood, and because again, this is the stage. This is really a good placement for acting, actually. That would be much preferable to anything truly committal and like forever, and things that like put your reputation into one place forever, or put your demeanor or position fixed into one place forever. I think acting would be so good because you can play different roles and you can slip in and slip out of different ego assertions. Likewise, musical careers, acting careers. That really feels like the best territory for this placement. Also, like entrepreneurs and business owners, because I see that you could also maybe shift into different industries or have different markets or have different businesses maybe that also give you an ability to shift quite a bit. This placement is demanding a shifting of the fixed energy of Leo. So you go into one role, you fixate, you put things together, you accomplish a goal, then you shift out into another role, combining that mutable energy of Jupiter with the fixed energy of Leo. Also beware of appearance obsessions. There can be a narcissistic appearance obsession with this placement too. Again, it fixates on the presence, it fixates on who I am and how I'm coming off and how can I emulate power and things like that. Regulus really debilitates this in a way also because it's so concentrated, but yes, you can actually do it is the thing. You can actually get that power, you can actually be that actor, you can actually be that, billionaire CEO with this placement. So, watch out for being too ambitious, though. I guess great things did not happen to Cersei in Game of Thrones, so watch out for that. Anyway, moving on. Okay, we have the lovely Jupiter in Virgo coming next.
Got the idea, right? There we go, 5 years ago.
Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'd like to talk about Jupiter, Guru, which is the great preceptor. And Jupiter represents philosophy, teachers of a high nature because it represents spirituality. And likewise, at the same time, it is relative to luck and fortune. And Jupiter is this power of expansion. Anything that Jupiter aspects or wherever it is, it will expand things. So it represents expansion and also freedom. Jupiter will give us the freedom that we need. And it is also called the Great Protector. So it's almost like it represents the protection of God, because Jupiter is the great source of luck, of happiness, and Jupiter is fun. Jupiter, because of its jovial qualities, people have fun when Jupiter is aspecting certain planets, and they have a great deal of optimism and confidence when Jupiter aspects other planets. But because it is expansion, sometimes it can deal with weight gain and overly expanded things, such as Jupiter rules the liver. And sometimes if it's not placed well in the chart, it can represent overexpansion in terms of excess in dealing with problems with the liver. So that's what Jupiter is prone to. Extremes, excesses, it's big, but it's jovial and it's spiritual. So it can deal with spiritual teachers. That's, the name is Guru, the spiritual teacher. And it can sometimes have reference to the Father, because the Father, in terms of being a spiritual teacher. So it rules religion, and it deals with opinions and how we believe. It also deals with higher education, because it deals with professors and teachers, philosophers, and long distance travels. So it deals with this long distance. It's big. Everything about Jupiter is big, and that's what you're going to have to remember with it. Jupiter, in terms of what planets it could be next to, can really have a variation, because Jupiter with Rahu can sometimes be over the top, too expanded, and can cause some major problems. But for the most part, it can bring in wealth when it is with Rahu, but it can cause problems for children, because Jupiter is the karaka indicator of children in a chart, and Jupiter's aspect, or Rahu's aspect to Jupiter, can cause issues or problems